Hello everyone. Hi, we're
Hey,
live. Hi,
Pablo.
Mason.
Good to see you.
Good to see you again. Yet one more stream. We keep doing this, and it's fun. So hi everyone. I know we already have some people are watching live. So hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We are doing one more of our EA lives that we do every Thursday. And actually, this is the second to last for the year. We have one more to go um, in next week, next Thursday, and then we'll just jump into our company-wide holiday break for the new year, and then we'll just resume our schedule on EA Live probably in the first week of January, if we're all not too tired of celebrating and all of that. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, Mason, it's just you and me today, and we have a nice topic that you were interested in talking about, of course. So can you kind of share a bit of like what is the topic we have for today, and what was the thought behind this topic?
Yeah, so what I'm, wanting to do is kind of get into more of the business side of the agency world and start to open up a bit of like what's happening underneath the hood. We really proud of the work that we've been doing. We have a great team, but if you just look on the outside, I think you're missing a whole lot of the design of how we design things kind of in the background. And so, just like this week, I tweeted out a bit around like what our marketing channels look like, what we were sort of seeing this year. And then, for today's conversation, it was a bit of like, it was a response to a question actually from Whit, who was on last week. And, he was asking about just like how we're thinking of, benefits and things along those lines. And so I, for the team, I wanted to sort of break down, how we've been growing, where we're making investments, like the things that we're starting to do, and what that starts to mean in a real kind of practical way. So in some ways, I think today is it's kind of like a public discussion of some of the stuff that we've been talking about internally, and then the other thing is I just really want to get a lot of this stuff kind of more out into the open, and almost this idea of trying to open source the agency model, because I'm self-taught, and there's a lot of stuff I don't know. So a lot of the stuff that I've been able to learn is just by sharing like, hey, this is how we've been starting stuff, just like how, we share templates, we share code samples, we share all sorts of things around like how we do the work and very little around like how the work gets made. Also, today, I'd just like to give a shout out to who is Lauren Wilson. So I got my sweatshirt in from Evil Twins. So Evil Twins, what's up? And I'll get a screen grab of this here in a little bit and post it out on Twitter.
That is a good one. I'll try to figure out if I can get one shipped down to Buenos Aires.
Yeah,
It's tricky
yeah,
to
might
get
have to
stuff
have,
down here, but
yeah.
I'd love to have one of those. Good shirt, good shirt. Awesome, man. Yeah, it's a great topic, and I know you had this thread on Twitter in which you kind of briefly discussed some of these things, and it inspired also, I think, Grace Walker. She also shared some information and about her business, and how
Mhm.
she got some of her clients throughout the year, and it's getting those conversations started. It's great, and it's super interesting to read how other people manage their business, because at
Yep.
the end of the day, we're all just making it up as we go, right? And
Yep.
it's interesting to see how others are doing it, and learning from each other. And do you think that you would like to see more of these sort of conversations? I know you're saying like you're self-taught, right?
Mhm.
You're just again making it up as you go in the best way that you can, just learning, reading. Do you think there's
Yep.
some space for more of these sort of like growth conversations, profitability conversations, how to run an agency, how to be a freelancer in Webflow?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big mantra is it's really, really hard. There's no magic carpets. And it's just about, trying to have some discipline. I think it's trying to have a conversation without, you know, um, bragging or flexing or anything along those lines. If we, and we have all sorts of stuff that we stumble with, even for today's conversation, you know, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, it's almost like here's some stuff I'm thinking about, but really some stuff that I also want to get better about. So doing a bit of building in public, with this. And I guess for me, the reason why is that, when we talk about tools like Webflow and we talk about really where building for the web is going, the biggest thing that I see is this opportunity gap. And so these tools, they allow for people to have superpowers. But it almost creates an opportunity gap where it's like we can deliver at an exponential value for our clients, but our business acumen is only growing incrementally. And so for us to really make an impact within the Webflow space, I think we've got to really, as a community, come together and, in a very, like, I guess, genuine and no BS way, like, talk about how to address that opportunity gap so that we can really break outside of the Webflow bubble. And so by the Webflow bubble, I just mean that there's a lot, like, there's a lot of like love and warmth within the community, but it's like we need to be able to take Webflow out to more businesses, be able to move up market, be able to move it into areas where it currently isn't. And that's what I feel really confident about, is like, I'm not worried about competing against, the other Webflow agencies, because there's so much opportunity for us to make an impact. At the same time, I will say, just like I tweeted about over this week, our leads from the experts network have all but vanished. So they've gone to zero since September. I've been expecting this, and so we've been planning for it and trying to diversify, how we're going to market, the channels that we're using, really focusing in on building those relationships. We've got a really good relationships, that we've built within the Webflow community, but starting to build those, in other areas, especially with, just having worked in the agency business for 20 years, like, tapping into those, working with people that know and trust us, and starting to bring them into how we've been building for the web.
Yeah, no, I think that's the part about, and the thing I always loved about Webflow is the community and how just sharing that in public. There's a lot of talk about like building in public and how, you're doing, clonables and sharing every day, or just talking about the hardships of a project, or like the design, the development. But then the conversation about the business sometimes is the one that is not the most discussed. So yeah, I think it's super valuable to talk about it. And do you want to jump onto, I know you have like some slides to kind of guide the conversation.
Yeah, I tidied up the slides that I shared internally, and in terms of next conversations that I want to have and things along those lines, like, we're going to talk about profitability. One of the questions that often comes up is like how to pitch a profitable project. And so for next year, or I'd say early 2023, which is, just a few weeks away, I'm kind of challenge anyone to whoever wants to come in and talk about this. I've opened it up on Twitter. I opened it up to like Matt at 8020. We talk about things a lot of times. But the idea is BYOC. Bring your own client. So not for us to just talk about like, how, pricing models and all of this sort of stuff, but from a buyer's perspective. I think that'll be really interesting. So anyone that wants to bring a client that you've worked with and how they view pricing and how they view buying, I think that'll be really, really great. So anyway, that's a long way of setting stuff up. I'll jump into the keynote now. We'll go from there. So let me find Keynote.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go full screen. Once I go full screen, I can't see anything else. So we'll kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, of course. Don't worry. I'll manage the back end, and you are the star of the show today. So
I'm the host. There
we go.
Yeah. But again, the kind of the idea here is trying to calculate profits for year-over-year growth. What I'll say is, like, we're actually not going to get into any like deep calculations, and I just really want to talk about kind of a way of thinking. and how we've been, what we're sort of challenged with, what we've been doing, things along those lines. So first thing is disclaimer: this is information for educational purposes. Read this as you like, but I am not a financial advisor, and this is not a financial advice. This is just things that I've learned so far. Also, fun fact, I had Chat GTP write this for me. So I said, hey, write me a disclaimer for talking about financial advice, and this is what it spit out.
That's lovely.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about forecasting. What is it? How do you approach this, and what are the challenges, and what do I want to get better at for next year? Profit details. So profit is often something that's kind of misunderstood, or you can look at it in a whole lot of ways. I'm not going to get too far down into the weeds with like net and gross and things along those lines, because quite frankly, I still get net and gross mixed up in my head. I know what the terms mean, but as a person that's wildly dyslexic, I am probably not the person to really pontificate about that individual subject, even though I apply those terms every day. But that starts to get into project dynamics. Again, within the agency and services side of the business, there is so much that's changing all the time, and it's like, how do you start to ride out those dynamics? And then finally, end of year complications, which is what we're sort of looking at now. And project dynamics and end of year complications really go hand in hand. So it's like how to start to look at that forecasting. What do you need to be doing in terms of reinvestment, and what do taxes mean, and all sorts of things. So first, on to forecasting, agency forecasting here. So a lot of times when we think about forecasting, what we're doing is we're taking historical numbers that we know and then trying to use those to drive our business forward. This is how I feel like it really, this is what it feels like. And so we're sort of trying to drive a car by looking in the rearview mirror, and we can only do that so effectively. But if I was to really dig into this, like even the historical numbers that we have to work with, I'm working on getting better at this, and we're actually bringing on like a controller to help with this. Sometimes they can be delayed. They can be delayed up to a couple weeks to sometimes a couple months, depending upon where we are in our project, how diligent everyone has been with entering in time, all this sort of stuff. So it's like a lot of this has to do with time entry, and then you have to like sort of round that up at the end of the month, and then you're kind of bringing that and kind of doing that in terms of like burn rate versus actual versus estimate, things like that. But really what this starts to feel like is it's sort of like blurry in the background and blurry in the foreground, where you're making your best guess here. The data is old, and where you're going can sometimes feel a bit nebulous. So this is I think the problem statement that I'm working on addressing, and then I'm going to start talking about just through some of these videos. And again, like we're doing pretty good. I've run a lot of this stuff through just like back of the napkin math, really basic adding and subtracting, nothing too wildly complicated. Not even, I would say, like high school algebra level. Like this is very much like, plus and minus, totaling stuff up, things along those lines. And if I was to kind of chart this out and say, what does forecasting look like? A fun fact is, so this is sort of approximation. These are just like funny numbers that I threw into here. But if our red line equals break even, then everything above the red line is quote unquote profit. What we're kind of looking at is like, if I was to take what I experienced basically at the No Code conference. So at the No Code conference, we did not have November or December fully booked. So these are the numbers that I was effectively looking at moving, as I was like winning the Webflow Agency of the Year. And then I was just like completely horrified around like, okay, I still have so much work to do to kind of bring this together to get us to the end of the year. Now, fast forward, we've been able to do this, and we actually have January and a lot of February booked out. But at any given time, as I was saying about, this sort of rear view mirror, what I'm looking at is I'm taking the invoices so within our contract, we invoice monthly, and then I chart out those invoices month over month to be able to get sort of a projection that looks like this. This is how I think about forecasting. It gives me some level of confidence so that I kind of know, like, one, where do I need to do some work, as well as, how do we need to think about growth? Do we need to bring on people? Things along those lines. So this is really one of the big challenges that any agency is going to be addressing, and one of the things that we'll be looking at today. So the way that this kind of comes up, so if we were to get to these individual numbers are a retrospective of where we've been. What we need to look at is project budgets. So within our project budgets, real basic cost, profit, but that cost and that profit can be a little bit deceiving. So as I was talking about a second ago, is profitable projects do not equal a profitable company. This is a thing which can be a little crazy, and also, like, obviously non-profitable products definitely do not equal a profitable company. but like, how to be able to you can have a really profitable project, but if everyone isn't fully utilized, so this gets into a whole other projection that we're not going to talk about today, which is just like how to think about your run rate versus the projects that you have on hand. So this even gets into a second level of complication. But for today, we're just going to really talk about kind of like our core costs, our gross, and our net. Our net is really what we start to average out, so that if we don't have, if our kind of long tail is dripping off, then we're going to go and take that net and then apply that back into the company. So the main things that we have as relates to cost are things like, obviously, like core staff salaries, health insurance, time off, management. So there's a management layer of people that aren't billable. The software, man, Figma. I love Figma, but sometimes those Figma bills can sneak up on me. I've had $2,000 Figma bills that have happened by people just like inviting people in as editors, and then all those editors add up. So you can go in and be working with a couple different clients. You invite a client team of 10 people by 75, that's $750. So that can happen really quickly. But so that's just like in your core, like, okay, this is the stuff that we have to be able to do. And then there's this other part. So on the right-hand side, that we start to think about within our profits, which is like how to start to reinvest back in the company. And this starts to go into things like people growth, going to conferences, general marketing, innovation. So innovation for us, it's everything from letter run to we have products that we're working on, and then capital runway and agency growth. So agency growth is a big topic. Capital runway is what's the money that we're setting aside so that we can level out, where our billings are. For us as a company, I think we try to have anywhere to 3 to 4 months of capital on hand so that we can make sure that we always hit payroll. As a almost 10-year company, that's been difficult. It's limited how we grow, but we've never had to miss a payroll. Now, if I'm running contract payments or things on those lines, I might be a day late. But again, we've never missed that, which is a good basic, as you should think about the agency business. Like that should be the most basic thing that you're doing. But again, it can get difficult.
And Mason, when you're just kind of running through all this, and you said you learned this, just by doing it. How I know you're probably going to say you're not even comfortable today, but when did you start to feel like I have a grasp on the monetary side of building an agency?
I've recently felt like I've like, okay, I kind of know how to ride this bike. But definitely the first couple years were the hardest. And within those first couple years, it's like I went from being a creative director where they would just sort of roll me out, and then I'd go into meetings and I'd talk about things, and I'd at that point kind of run a profit and loss. So I kind of knew a little bit around how that works. And quite frankly, at my last agency, is like if we weren't profitable, you had to fire your friends. So it was a big incentive to always remain profitable. And by fire your friends, it's like they're like, okay, well, great. Well, who on your team you want to work with anymore? So it has been bit by bit. I think that I would say I haven't watched I haven't gone to any conferences. I haven't watched like a ton of YouTube videos. A lot of this has just been, back of the napkin, like tracking this in in some type of spreadsheet, looking at just like, what are the invoices in, what are my costs, how do I make sure that we're planning for the future? Like that,
Yeah.
those are probably the three basic things. And then that starts to become, as you're growing, like as a 1 and 2 person shop, you're like, okay, I get this, fairly straightforward, got money in the bank. You grow to have like, 3 to 4 contractors. So for us as a company, we really didn't have, I'll just kind of go to project dynamics, but as a company, we didn't have anyone full time for the first 3 years. We did have people that we contracted with on a full-time basis. But moving to full time, like that's a whole sort of next level of complication. But I think definitely starting slow. As a group, we've grown about 20% a year over year. And that's with staff and with billings. And so we'll get into how we've thought about that, but it's allowed us to, incrementally move into this. And there was a podcast I was listening to with YoY. It was the Webflow, and he was talking about how they grew too fast, and just the stress and the challenges that put him and his team under. I think that's one of the things that I love about people like Grace Walker, is that she's intentionally thinking about not only the type of business, but the type of life that she wants to have and the type of work that she wants to have. I think anyone, that's kind of watching this or kind of, thinking about what to do within an agency, I would say that, it's like, there's this question of like, do you freelance? Do you start an agency? An agency is just a thesis. So it's an idea that you want to prove out into the market. It's not a number of people that you're trying to bring onto payroll. And so as a single provider, you can still have a really great agency. You can have a pointed thesis that you want to be able to prove. For us, it's like, how can we go and create great products through great stories and really try to take a human focused approach to all of our work and use the shape of story, use the sort of the way that stories are constructed as a way to start to think about how we're planning out our design and working within the designs and the final output that we're creating for our clients. So that was the thesis, and I could do that as a single person, or I could do that as a team of 34. It's not about those people. It's more around like how we're trying to work out into the world. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's kind of like a longer.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like for me, it's of course there has to be motivation behind it, right? Of course, the question was like on when did you start, and of course you answered that, but then you went into this whole thing like around motivation, which I just really resonates, right? Because, and I was thinking about you the other day, and I was gonna ask this in private, but you responded to me in public already, which was like, why are you doing all of this? Because to me, I sometimes feel like building a team of 30 people. I don't know if I could do that, So there has to be, just out of the responsibility that would weigh down on me. I might do it, I might be able to, but not having never done it, it feels like such a big challenge, right? And to hear that, part of that, of course, is the motivation of like telling a story, and how you're thinking about that. Then that is the reason why you keep on kind of growing, right? And like Grace, she on the other side, she wants to stay small because she wants to live a life that is very specific. So that's her motivation, and so yeah.
Well, I think as well, as I was talking about within these superpowers that these tools give us, I feel like we're kind of at the muscle car version of the industry, where there's just like so much power, you can just go so fast, but there's just not really good seat belts, so it can be a little dangerous. For my comfort level, it's kind of like the analogy of boiling a frog. Like the water has just gotten hotter over time. I mean, I'm 23 years on my agency career, so I was able to spend 12 years in other agencies learning how they worked. And even for today's conversation, you know, I'm wanting to just like for you, for everyone, talk about how it works. And there's a really great book that, you know, maybe when we do the book club next month, called The Great Game of Business. And the idea is like to try to be able to share with your team, and it's really what I'm sharing with your team, but how the business works, so that people understand that it's not just like Scrooge McDuck swimming in money, but like that, you know, there's big dynamics that have to happen here, and you know that if everyone can kind of see how everything's working, then it all starts to make more sense when decisions are made either around like growth or like when you're, you know, when there's pressures and things along those lines, instead of what I think is the worst thing that a company can do is tell you like, hey, everything is great, we're just like hunky dory. And then all of a sudden like it changes and then there's mass layoffs and there's really just not a lot of like visibility. So I think that's something that I definitely try to keep in mind, and something that I fully believe in, and I'm trying to, you know, do as we're building the business.
And I remember when I was joining EA, I asked that point blank to you. I don't know if you remember on our interview,
totally.
like, why should like I don't, how should I feel safe joining here, like as on a financial level, like am I gonna get paid, you know? And you said the same thing that you just shared here, right? And you said, look, I try to have, you know, 4 months of money on hand to just, if everything just implodes, at least I'll let you all know, and I can pay you for the next 3 months until you find your next gig, you know? And that way of just doing business, well,
and,
you know,
and again,
I ended up here.
That's kind of the nuclear option, like, you know, it's not a like that things are dire at that point, but I have lived through that. So at the start of COVID, we lost 80% of our revenue within 30 days. So we had a couple really big contracts that were just like canceled out of nowhere. And so trying to have that buffer, like, good news, we were able to build back all of that revenue by the end of the year, and we netted out even. So we didn't have to cut staff, we didn't have to cut salaries. But if we didn't have the confidence, and this gets back into that projection, so that you can sort of see like where your projects are, but then you also need to see like, you know, where your capital is. If we didn't have that confidence, then we wouldn't have been able to make it through that. So I think it's just trying to have those safety features in place.
Awesome. And I won't derail you anymore.
No, like again, like this is just like kind of conversation here, and you know, now we'll get into the dynamics. Which again, like it's fairly straightforward. You know, you have margin, you have cost, but then you know those margins start to fluctuate as you have different size projects. This is kind of like an ideal, like you have like kind of, you know, base projects and a little bigger project and things along those lines. What I end up seeing is that like we have something that looks like this, where we have little projects, we have big projects, and then we have this, where we have little projects, big projects, and then like projects where we're paying for the privilege to work on them, which is horrific. You know, that red area is like, oh no, we went over the budget. And then all of a sudden, like now, what, you know, if we were to go back a couple slides and we were looking at that sort of like net versus gross, is like all of a sudden our net has now been reinvested back into another project, which, you know, isn't profitable. And then this starts to, you know, get even more complicated as, you know, you're thinking about growing and bringing on more projects, where, you know, you have to be able to look at every single one of these, understand, you know, what that base, you know, budget is, where you are with profit, and then try not to have like project 6 over here, which is just going to like wipe you out. You know, it's like you can have one where you just like misestimated it, and all of a sudden like your entire 6 months is not where it needs to be. So this is definitely something that, you know, we try to look at. And again, like a lot of my job is just like I spend a lot of time in spreadsheets, and you know, and we're bringing on now a controller. So we've grown to the point where I can't just do this anymore, and I need to be able to have someone that can help me. So that's something that I hope next year, as they teach me, that I can start to teach more people.
And Aaron from Automate All the Things was like shocked that you're doing all of this in numbers.
Oh yeah. You know, I think it's whatever tool that works for you, and you know, it's like Airtable is so powerful, and we're gonna use Airtable for a lot of like our CRM and like a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, kind of month over month planning. But I'm just so comfortable in numbers. Like I can kern the type, like I understand all the formulas. It's just like as the designer in me, it feels
Yeah.
good. But yeah, so this is monthly dynamics. Again, a month is comprised of all the projects that we're putting together, and then trying to make sure that we're sort of above that line, and always kind of going up and to the right generally.
Yeah.
But then again, you can be hit with something where, for example, there's months where we've had to bring on like a lot of contractors to be able to fulfill work. And then all of a sudden, what we had estimated something at, which was generally at an internal rate, now we're paying at contract rates, and we're not able to have the same margin, even though we delivered on the same work. And so it's like month floor, it might have looked like we're really killing it, but in fact, like we're going to be under that month. And that then starts to create even more kind of confusion as we get into the forecasting here. So it's like you have a couple of those months, you have some good months, you have some like months that aren't so great. And then again, if I'm here at month, when I've reordered some of these to make the point, so my months aren't in the right order, but if I'm over here at kind of the what says month 3, but and then I'm trying to project out like where we're going to be for like month 6, 7th, and 8th. That's where it's like you can go and look at those projected invoices, but really the next thing that we're going to do better at next year is having a sense of confidence around the pipeline. So what we're going to do is, and we haven't done this yet, but we are going to be moving into Airtable, and then within Airtable, setting up all of the deals that are coming in. So as I said on Twitter this week, we've got about, at any given time, 21 deals that are in some level of the project process. Some of that is like, I think if I was to go back and count, we've got like 7 or 8 that might be on the back burner. We've got 3 to 4 that are just kind of like new into the form. We've got a couple that'll be, in the process of creating a proposal, some that are within the contracting phase, all of that stuff. So all of that starts to line up. But what I want to do is be able to assign a level of confidence to each one of those that's within the pipeline, and then within that level of confidence be able to calculate what is what we can sort of hope for. So and also then be able to score those based on where they're coming from. So if it's a referral and they're kind of like earlier in the prospect stage, and it's a non-competitive bid, then I can give them a higher level of confidence and start to add that into my forecast. So even though I might not know where I am within my invoicing, I can say like, okay, Jill had referenced over Amy. Amy has this, kind of project and budget. I have a 70% confidence that could land, and then starting to apply that into the model. So that's something that
is the confidence formula proprietary?
No. I mean, a lot of
feeling,
I'll and how he had actually shared with me an Airtable where he's doing a lot of this stuff, but it was so complicated I just couldn't understand it. So I'm going to kind of make the Mason version of that. And it's just like beautiful. Like he had apps running, like all sorts of stuff, like really, really great. But yeah, I'd love to be able to, and kind of like a second conversation. I think for today, it's just starting to set up some of those ideas, but as a second conversation, break that down in terms of like, okay, here's how we're doing forecasting just on invoicing. Here's how we're doing forecasting based on projected sales. So now we've talked about that. Now, end of year complications, which is really where we are today. And, as we were talking about, like kind of throughout the year, we're able to fund this through the margins of our projects. But then at least in the US, we hit this thing. So if we're to, how do we think about company growth? So for like 2021, 18 full-time people, 2022, 34, how to fund that year over year. So it's like, oh, the idea is we'll just take the profits from 2021, we'll put that into our reserves for 2022, and we'll be good. The challenge is like 30% of that, it's going to hit with taxes. So, all of a sudden, not only do we have the dynamics that we were talking about with kind of the ups and downs on month to month, but now we're going to apply taxes to that. And so we need to go and take that profit and then move out 30% of that. So, it's like that minus taxes is now going into the growth of the company for the next year. And again,
and the growth has been significant, right? Because you mentioned a couple minutes ago, 20% year over year, but this is more like 100%, 80% growth in full-time employees.
Absolutely. And so this year, there's actually a lot of pressures where it's like, yes, we've had our best sales year ever, but now it's like, okay, well, we have, the team's grown, like what we're doing is growing, like, all of this stuff. So, I full stop, like took, those profits from last year and then, been and reinvested it back in this year. And that's happened from day one. So year one, again, just growing really slowly. And so, now I think if I'm talking about anything, it's like, okay, I'm talking about it 10 years in. And I just really want to emphasize that this is not like, we're not a 3-year-old company. We're not a 2-year-old company. It's like 10 years, just incrementally every year, having that confidence that sort of like of, where we are from sort of a baseline revenues that we can count on, and then, how we're kind of turning that over, and then, incrementally, dealing with the complexity as well as with, how to fund the team. So again, if I was to just kind of reflect back, the things that I'm thinking about a whole lot right now is forecasting. We're going to get better at that. I can, the invoicing forecasting is fairly straightforward. Again, if I was to talk about, we could have probably just a whole part on, setting up invoices for us contractually. We take our project. So if it's a fixed fee project, we'll break up the invoice schedule to be monthly. So 12 or like whatever it is, like a 3-month project, we're going to go and invoice over that 4 times. So it's like at the beginning of the project and then at the end of every month. And what we don't do is we don't do half up front and half on the end, because I think that just creates too much pressure at the end. And this allows for us to have sort of like a less lumpy kind of projections of our forecasting. Now that's a contract thing that has to happen, and we can talk about that later, but definitely trying to think about those as even increments per month, as opposed to half and half. Getting into the project profit details, this is where I think, anyone and just as you're going through it, listing out everything from a cost standpoint as well as from sort of a revenue standpoint, and then getting into just like those nitty gritties of just like, even the next thing here is like utilization, or kind of like how billable everyone is. So it's like, if we're not very billable, then we can have profitable projects, but just like not making our numbers month over month. So starting to get some of those numbers down. Again, any spreadsheet can do this, listing out, all the costs, and then anything that's a management cost, then just having that as part of the sort of that core cost there. Next part here is just, again, project dynamics, understanding the ebbs and flow, and starting to plan for that. I guess this is just kind of keeping that in line month over month, having some money set aside so that when things get slow, that you're okay. And then end of year complications, how to start to account for that. Again, like we're looking at right now is like we've got January and February pretty well sold. How do we need to make sure that we're making investments? And I'll buy like computers, things along those lines at the end of the year, that we can then kind of count towards taxes on this year. So anyway, that's a lot of the stuff. I'll stop sharing here, and then if you want to bring me on kind of full screen, and we can answer questions, or if there's other kind of topics that you're thinking about here.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for sharing that. I'll give another prompt there in the chat. We had Dale listening and processing, so we'll see if he has any like questions that came up from that, and so I'll throw that prompt there on the YouTube too. And no, for me, of course this is super interesting. Like I said, it is so much of it is beyond my comprehension. So it's nice to hear you talk about it and how you're thinking about it. There was this on this thread that you shared in Twitter. You talked about how, not only about the business side of things, but also clients and leads and where they came from. And I think that was interesting was how the ratio of new clients versus sort of how you call it? Like returning, new versus returning clients. How that shifted, between last year and this year. So I was curious if you had any thoughts on, like, are you generally, or do you recommend like that the side, how much of the pie is like returning clients versus looking for new business?
Well, it's like the standard answer of it sort of depends. So this year I'm actually looking at our returning clients. So we've had like one big client that we've been working with that just at the beginning of last year, it accounted for about 40% of our total revenue. We had a big team that was staffed on that, and now it's going to be down to maybe like 3 to 5% of our revenue. And it's not that our revenues have shot up; it's just like they've started to pull back. But and that pullback actually happened over the summer. But for us, we've been able to actually have a big uptick in new clients. So that will start to offset. But in any time, I think whenever we're working with anyone, the main thing that I'm thinking about is like, how can we make sure that we're doing a great job for them? How can we make sure that they're wildly excited to be working with us, and that they want to continue to work with us, but also kind of like refer us to people that they know. And one of the things that I was thinking about responding to, so there was someone that had posted a question of like, well, which channel are you going to be, really investing in next year? And kind of the answer is all of them, but just in different ways. So I think it's important to break down those channels from kind of a customer journey standpoint and look at it in terms of awareness, consideration, conversion, active, and then referral. So that active client, they're still they're a customer. They can, we can take on new projects, things along those lines. And then the second part, because like our two big areas is like, references. So people that are referring business over to us, and that's happened incrementally as we've grown just in terms of reputation and delivery and kind of, a really great team. That's not a thing that I've done. That's, how everyone, probably yourself included, is just working with everyone that, that we encounter with and just delivering, great work.
Yeah. Great answer. Thank you. We have a question from Dale. He said he needed some time to frame the questions. So here's one of those. Mason, how much of your time is devoted to directing creative work versus managing business and people? Would you say the mix reflects your personal preferences?
That's a great question. And I would say that, my job has been changing every year for the last 10 years. So at the beginning, I was doing, all of the creative direction because it was there, I was the lead designer. And that works for a little while. I think it's really important as soon as you can, if you're going to be growing a team, is to step out of that design role as quickly as possible, because what can happen is that you can compete with your team, or that you want to step out of that creative role. And this year, it's really been interesting. I'm so thankful for the management team and just like everyone. We have this idea of engagement leads, and if I've been able to do anything, it's like really get out and promote the agency more. And it's a balance of sort of like boots on the ground numbers, and then promoting the agency, and then try to think about like high level work that we want to be putting out. So this past year, I did. I'm probably more heavily involved with the brand of EA, and for projects like Let It Run and the EA website, and like the articles that we're putting out and things along those lines. So I view that as like I'm the client now. So I am not on the creative team. I tell everyone that you should treat me as a client, and you should manage me as a client. So I'm going to be I have a strong opinion on this stuff, but separating out that just having really clear lanes of working. And I think for the last part of your question here, it's just like, what's my personal preference? And I think for me, I'm not good at a whole lot of stuff. Like I'm a notorious bad speller. I never learned how to use Photoshop. I'm an okay designer. I learned how to program, and then I'm not like the best programmer. And by programming, I mean like I came up doing Flash design and development. And I understand like a lot of the object-oriented stuff and things like that, but it's just like not where my strength is. But the things that I think, pretty good at, and like what my preference in terms of ideal thing to do every day is like I love to find and work with really great people that have interesting kind of strengths. And then the second part of this is like thinking about how to apply those strengths to needs out in the market. So it's like, what are these people really great at, and then what's the sort of thing that that's missing. And so part of that missing is trying to solve that through sales. I love the sales process. I think sales is like this great kind of problem that you're trying to solve for someone. And it's really not about trying to trick anyone to anything. It's like, oh, they're trying to go and do X and Y, and they have this complicating factor, and then their budget is this. And then the third thing that I really enjoy is I'm full of ideas. So, I go on a run and I come back and I have like all sorts of ideas. And so trying to think about what's a vision that I can put out for the team on how we can bring those two things together, like both the people, their strengths, and then needs that are happening in the market. And then, again, like that horizon line that we can be working towards. So, all right, what's another question here? All right, I didn't know about
Yeah, they're saying you're a master of numbers.
Master of numbers. I am pretty good at numbers, and I can share. What's good about it. So I struggle with Excel. Like it just feels so like I don't know. Feels so icky. Like I'm not. Like, I can't really work in a Microsoft project the same way, I think, and that's probably my upbringing of working on a Mac for a while. But yeah, I could even break down or share like our early project plans. So the first 2 years of business, we didn't have a website. And the way that I sold work was with a spreadsheet. And what I learned is that as a creative, we often think that people are buying our creativity, but really what they're trying to buy is an end result and an understanding that we're going to respect their investment. And so what I would do is I would go in and I've seen these project plans before. I'm not a project manager. I've never taken like a project management class, or like any sort of certificate or whatever. But I remember kind of like this Gantt chart looking thing. And so I would make these Gantt charts in numbers and color code them and create the bars and all of this stuff, and then tally everything up. And what was awesome is that I would jump on a call with someone. One, I was the only, I think, designer that was showing anyone a Gantt chart. And it would just build this trust and this confidence. So selling with a spreadsheet is such a a thing that most people aren't doing. And then if someone comes back and they're like, oh, I need to, that feels too expensive, or what can you do that's less than that? Then we're like, oh, well, let's just go and take out a design direction, or let's go in and we'll shorten this, or you start reducing features as opposed to creating discounts or reducing the rate and things like that.
I have a follow-up question on that, which comes from the audience, and I don't want to color your answer, but it might be similar to what you were just saying. But Pasquale from Italy is asking, he switched his agency to a Webflow agency, but it looks like people don't value a website as much as it should. apparently maybe is it something, cultural or not, but people just want to buy his service for ads instead of for development. Any advice?
Yeah, I think I think trying to find where this is valued is definitely an art. And even for us, we lose so many pitches, and we're just not the right fit for so many groups. And they will come back and be like, oh, we can get this at a fifth of the price or whatever. It's like, that's not when we're working with someone. It's that really what I'm selling on is that I can alleviate risk. So I can say that we're going to build this once. It's going to be delivered on time. It's going to be delivered at the budget we said it is going to. We're going to help you socialize this internally. A lot of what we're also doing is helping to build consensus. So within a company, and I'm sure everyone's experienced this, is like, Bill says one thing, Jane says another, and then Scotty over here comes in and tries to like squash the whole thing. So having some processes in place where we're getting those different viewpoints at the beginning, building that consensus through the project, things along those lines. Like, that's the real value that we're delivering. It's not actually the website. It's a complete marketing package type of thing, or like it's a solution to a marketing problem. So yeah, I don't know. I think trying to understand that pain point really well for where the customers are coming from, and then creating solutions for that pain point. If there's anything that I think within the Webflow community, we often try to sell like a Webflow site as opposed to, someone like being able to move faster or to save money within their web marketing costs. Things along those lines. I was actually talking with someone, and they had mentioned that like they are running they were testing out some lines, and one of them was kind of like what Webflow talks about, which is sort of like, own your web layer, and like we're guilty of that. We've talked about it, like take control of your website, things like that. And what they found was that they had a better response with something that was more tactical. Like, we helped this company save 20% of their marketing cost by doing X. So kind of surfacing that value, making it apparent with numbers, making it somewhat quantifiable. Now,
can I just interject there for a second? I always think about this sort of thing, and this is something I purely worked at Mural, right? And we talked about this in the marketing. I was in the marketing org for half of my tenure there, and we always talked about how not to try to be smart with your customer. Just speak to what they want to hear, right? If you're telling them you can in Mural, you can create a whiteboard with like colors and blah blah blah, it's like the customer doesn't really care about your technical prowess, your product's technical prowess. If you're doing this in Webflow with a greenhouse integration or a fin suites, and you're cool because you use attributes, right?
Yeah.
They just care about
they don't care.
What's the value for my business. So
yeah,
it's for me, it's always about just abstracting out our nerdy aspect as much as we can and just talk to them about what they care, which is, hey, I need this page live in like a month or in 2 months, and I need to have people submit a form to reach out to my sales team. And that's what they need. So you can tell them, hey, with this, you can do it at this rate with this numbers. And then that's, I think that's how you start getting, landing a client versus talking about all the technicalities that they don't really care about.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because getting into trying to reflect what they're asking for, it can be a challenge. And I don't know how many times on Twitter I've seen debates on like, oh, should I be using this class naming system? Should it be underscores or spaces or all caps or title? And it's like, it does not matter. It's helpful. So the way that we sell it is, we say that our goal is to work our way out of a job. And what that means for us is that we want to work our way out of the job that you've hired us for, and then into the next high value challenge that you're facing as a company. And that we want to help, with shared symbols and training and things along those lines, so that they can go in and have an idea on a Monday and turn it around with a landing page on a Tuesday. Now that starts to resonate. Telling them that we build with made with Knockout, and it's a semantic atomic system. Like, they're just like blah blah blah. I mean, there might be one designer that's like, oh, they're using a 14 column grid, and that's really cool. But that's not the buyer.
Pasquale says thanks for the advice. He'll try to apply it at his agency. He's trying to focus on creating the best Italian Webflow agency. Just reach out Pasquale too on our, on Twitter. We're at Edgar Allan Co.
Awesome.
Just you can chat there with us if you need any other help. Mason Labs just chatting on Twitter. You'll see him there hanging around. And
one more question,
ahead.
or one more thing. I was just going to kind of respond to that. As it relates, so here's where we're going as an agency, is that last year made a big effort to establish ourselves as an internationally known Webflow agency. And it's like, check, we did that. Here's the kicker, is that from a search standpoint in the US, there's only 400 searches a month for Webflow agency.
Wow.
And so what we're doing now is it's great, we've established ourselves. And I think, again, there's something to be said for establish yourself as the best Webflow agency in Italy, because it's definitely, it's that's going to be a market where, we work within even the Latin American market and things along those lines. But it's also, I think, trying to break out of the Webflow bubble and say, targeting these WordPress companies, or things like the WordPress companies that have WordPress, things along those lines, and say hey, I can help you publish faster, or just I can help to solve this pain point that you have with feeling blocked with WordPress. So it's just some stuff that we're seeing in the market. And as there's talk of niching down is really important, but I think it's trying to find when to catch that wave. And we've been trying to catch this wave now for 8 years. So we've been working in Webflow since 2015, going on 8 years. And we're just, we've been waiting for the tsunami. And it's sort of it's this very gradual thing.
The tide is rising.
Yeah, the tide is rising. We're going to get there. And there's still a ton of opportunity. We have, we have our healthiest pipeline that we've ever had. So that's good. But the reason why is that we've been breaking out and then trying to identify customers that are not in the Webflow space, or you haven't even heard of it yet. All right, that's my final thought.
Awesome. And I'll just want to call out a message from Omkar, and we can close out after this one just because we're at time. He's saying, first ever session I attended was your demo on how to calculate your project costs and estimate projects using Screaming Frog and numbers. It certainly helped a lot. So yeah, we have some nice messages on the chat, Mason. People love the topic. So I guess we can keep making the list of upcoming topics for YoY Live around forecasting, invoicing, sales, etc. And also, and I know, Mason, you don't like the me saying reach us out on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
But if any of you have topics you want us to discuss at YoY Live, please do reach out on Twitter. Just send a message or just follow Twitter us, and we can add that to the pipeline of topics that we have for YoY Live, because we have one a week, so we do need some content.
And maybe for next week, I mean, so I don't know, Dale, if you're around, or some of the people that are in the comments, maybe we could have kind of an open table to be able to dig into some of these ideas in more depth, and then have these have different people on actually within the Zoom here, or within our StreamYard, whatever it is. So
I love that idea. Sort of an open house where people can come in and actually talk live with us.
So I think it would just be great, because I hear you on the challenges of getting people to pay a premium price for a service and all of this stuff. Another topic that I want to talk about next year is M&A, mergers and acquisitions. I think we're going to start to see a lot of that within the Webflow space, as established agencies, they're not going to be able to move in, but what they are going to do is start to buy Webflow agencies. And how to start to prep for that. So I've got a really good friend of mine who works in M&A, and I'm going to have him on next year to talk about things like EBITDA and like, the things that you need to start to prepare for, so that when someone comes and they say like, hey, I want to, we have all these clients, we'd love to be able to apply those clients to Webflow, turnkey, let's go. How to start to think about that and the things that you need to do to protect your business. But next week, let's do an open house for whoever's up for it. And
I'll be reaching out to Dale, Pasquale, Omkar, and just anyone else who's interested in maybe hanging out with us for a couple of minutes next week in this open house. And that's about it for today. We're 2 minutes over, so I do want to keep us true to our time. Mason, thanks again for another one of these. Thanks everyone in the comments. Really, it's been super valuable to the conversation to have you there asking questions, and great questions too. So that was great. And yeah, like I said, we're Edgar Allan Co on Twitter, so you can reach us out there and we can start a conversation. And that's about it from me, Mason. I don't know if you have anything.
Pablo, thanks so much for putting this together, and you always you keep everything really well framed up, and you got like a great outline. Like there's so much structure, so it's so appreciative.
Of course, I love it. I love doing it. So thanks for the opportunity. Well, everyone, we'll see you on the next stream next week, and see you around.
Thanks so much. Talk to you later. Bye.